Hello and welcome to Dog Day Chess. In this episode we're going to look at a game that I played that had a lot of instructional elements and also a pretty interesting finish. I'm playing black and white opens with e4 and I play e5 and then white brings the queen out to h5. This is the wayward queen opening. It's not a particularly strong opening for white because the queen can be attacked by my pieces. So first of all I play knight to c6 to protect my pawn. And then white plays bishop to b5. And this is not the normal move. Normally the bishop would come out to c4 to add pressure to my f7 pawn. But on b5 the bishop does threaten my e-pawn's protector, this knight. And if we should exchange these pieces then my pawn would be hanging. So I played g6 to kick the queen out of there. I could have done so with knight to f6 as well. That might have even been a better move. But g6 does get the job done. The queen goes back to e2. And now I play knight to f6. White does force the exchange of minor pieces. I'm not sure why. But afterwards, he plays d3, and I bring my bishop out. Stepping back for a moment, normally I would fianchetto my bishop so that it could watch over the dark squares around my king after I castle short. But I didn't like doing it because my own pawn blockaded the long diagonal, so I thought I would have trouble getting the bishop active on this diagonal. So that's why I developed it to c5. White played h3, and then I castled. And then white brought the bishop out to g5, pinning my knight to my queen. Now of course this is somewhat annoying, but I decided to ignore it for the time being. And I played b5. And white plays the knight out to f3, attacking my weak pawn. So I bring my rook out to defend the pawn, and then white castles. And here I play a5, increasing my space on the queen side. White brings the knight out, and finally I get rid of that annoying pin by playing queen to d6. At this point, white decides to trade off his bishop for my knight. I'm not entirely sure why, but now we have a game where I've got two bishops versus two knights. And one of his knights goes to b3 to attack my bishop, so I bring my bishop back. Here white plays h4. Which weakens his king's position considerably, because first of all my queen is attacking h4, and secondly it weakens the g4 square and allows my bishop to occupy it. Now my queen would be able to take h4 if it weren't for that knight, so I take advantage of this hole on g4 and bring my bishop out, pinning the knight to the queen. The other knight falls back to add protection to the f3 knight. But this won't be enough, because now I can do a combination that will allow me to win this h-pawn. I'll capture the pawn with the queen, and after the knight captures my queen, my bishop captures the white queen. The rook moves out to attack my bishop, and so I bring it back to g4. Here white plays c4, which creates another hole here on d4 for my other bishop. So I immediately jump in there to occupy it. I'm not worried about this situation with the pawns. If the pawn should capture my pawn, then I'll capture back, and all that'll have done is allowed me to undouble my pawns. Now you may notice that my bishop is actually attacking this weak pawn here on b2, so white follows that up by bringing the rook out to defend it. So next I play a4. I want to prevent the white knight from going to b3. White plays b3, and I play b4. So then white brings the other knight to f3, attacking my strong bishop. I move my bishop to c3, pinning this knight to the rook, with the intent of exchanging these minor pieces over here and further exposing the white king. So at this point white plays king to h2, and this is a mistake because it allows me to win some material. Knight to h2 would have been better, because it would force my bishop off of this diagonal, say to e6. But with my bishop off of this diagonal, the rook can then safely go to the d file to protect the knight that's under attack. But instead white played his king to h2, and this allows me to exchange the minor pieces and then win the knight. Stepping back a bit, it would have been slightly better if white had captured my bishop with his knight, because then white gives up the exchange instead of a full knight. But that's not what happened in the game, so I did win the knight. And then white played rook to e2 to attack my bishop, and I brought it back to f4 with check. The king moved up to h3, and then I played c4. My strategy at this point was to neutralize the rooks. My advantage is that I've got an extra bishop, so I thought if I could close off all the files, the rooks would have very little scope, both my rooks and the white rooks, but nevertheless, with the rooks neutralized, my bishop will become very important. I'm trying to accentuate my advantage. Now, I realize that moving my pawn onto the dark square does limit my bishop's mobility on the queen side, but it's really the king side that's important right now. I've got a passed pawn on the h-file, and I'd like my pieces to work together to try to get that pawn promoted. So white plays his rook over to c2, and I play my rook to a6. I'm preparing to double my rooks in case the a-file opens up. Then white plays his king to g4, and I play h5. I'm starting to advance my passed pawn with tempo. And the king goes back to h3, and I double up my rooks. The white king goes to g2, and my king goes to g7. This is a clearance move that will allow my rook to move behind my passed pawn when necessary. White plays his rook over to e2, and I play h4, advancing my passed pawn. Then the rook goes to h1 to try to stop it. And here I play g5. White king goes to h3, my king to g6, and then the white king goes to g4. So now my g-pawn is blockaded and my passed pawn can't safely advance. So I turn my attention to the other side. I open up the a-file with a pawn exchange to give my rooks access to these backward pawns that white has. After the exchange, I bring my rook out to a2, challenging the second rank, and we exchange rooks. So now my rook has penetrated into white's camp and can attack these backward pawns. At the moment it's attacking the f-pawn, so the white rook slides in behind to defend it. So then I bring my rook over to b2 to attack the b-pawn, and the white rook comes to the open file. I've just relinquished the open file, so white has ideas of his own to come in and attack my weakened pawns. But there's a slight difference here. As we'll see, my rook will have better access to the white king than the white rook will have to my king. And this will make all the difference. So I take the opportunity to capture this f-pawn. This pawn was restricting my bishop's movements and also my rook's access to the h and g file. And the white rook comes down and checks my king. I play f6 to block the check, and the white rook comes in and attacks my weak pawns on the c file. So from here things get even more interesting, because I play rook to g2 check. The white king has only one legal square to move to, and I bring my rook down, forking the king and this weak pawn. The white king moves out of check, and I capture the pawn with a discovered check on the king. Here we start to see the usefulness of my bishop. And the king goes over to g2. Now I bring my rook back to g3. I'm doing this kind of windmill style. Now I was hoping that the white king would go to f2, because if it did, there would be nothing that white could do to stop my h-pawn from promoting. For example, after h3, perhaps the rook could capture c7, and then h2, and then rook to c8, and the pawn promotes. But I guess white realized that this would happen, so instead he moved the king back to h2. And so now I capture the d-pawn, again with another discovered check, and king to h2. And then I shoot back again, windmill style, to see again if he'll go to f2. But at this point white resigned, because after king to h2, then I can pick up the last of these pawns, and I'll have 3 passed pawns, and my pieces will be in good positions to help them promote. So I thought that was an interesting game. For the last part of the game I was up a bishop, and I especially liked how things worked out with my idea of closing off the files to neutralize the rooks until the time was right to open up the a-file and use my rook to help attack the king and the weak pawns. As always, I hope you learned something from this episode, and thanks for watching.